Alrighty, so the first thing we do on a walk around is go inside the cockpit and we'll just check a couple things here. First thing we want to do is turn one of the fuel selectors on so that the beeper doesn't go at us. We turn the battery on next. That's a battery switch. And we check that we have a minimum voltage of 24. Right now we have 26 volts. Next thing, we come up here and there's a fire detect button here. So that bell works and that light right here came on. Next thing we test is the annunciator panel. So we press this button and make sure that all these lights are working. And at the same time that the fuel selector off horn is working. Next thing we do is we come over here and we check our oil temperature. Oil temperature right now is acceptable. It's about 4 degrees outside, so it's acceptable for what it is. And obviously we want to check that we have enough fuel. We have about just under 1,000 pounds of fuel right now. And then we come back here and make sure that our battery switch is off before we drain the battery. And that's it for the inside. Now we can go back outside. Alright, the next part is to do the inside of the engine. Just check the oil. A couple other things here. The left hand side of the cowling is open. This is a Pratt & Whitney 6 114A. We want to check that our brake fluid is at the right level. There's a max line and a minimum line. We're just below the max line, so that's good. We check that the breakers are in. I've pulled the cabin lights and the clock light just so that the battery doesn't run low if someone accidentally turns the lights on. And we want to check that our standby alternator breaker is in. This is the standby alternator right here. It's the only forward part on this engine. We want to check that the tension on the belt is good. There's no cracks in the belt. And then what we want to do is check the oil. Right now we're 1 quart below max cold, and that's perfectly acceptable. The maximum that we can go to is 2 quarts below max cold. Close that back up and make sure it's locked down. If that is not locked properly, it can open up in flight under pressure and you can lose all your oil and have an engine failure. This right here is the starter generator, so it acts as a starter below 46% NG and automatically switches to a generator once the start is complete, and generates electricity for your radios and whatever else needs running on the electricity in the cabin. Another thing that we look for on the walk around is this fire loop. Just make sure that it's secured all the way around. This fire loop is connected in front of the firewall right there. What this does is, if there's a fire that develops in the under the cowling, this fire loop detects the temperature and gives you that fire warning light and sound inside. Another thing we look for here is to make sure that this red flag is all the way in. If it's popped out, that means that there's some contaminant that's been through the fuel filter and it's a no-go on the walk around. That's it for this side. Alright, we're on the right hand side of the cowling. I've got this one open here. What we're mainly looking for over here is that the battery is witness wired or lock wired in. If the battery falls offline during a start, you can get a hung start or a hot start. So just make sure that everything's in place. And same thing on this side, we look for the fire loop, make sure that it's in place all around, it hasn't come disconnected anywhere. For your information, that's the ITT sensor over there. Everything looks normal to me over here. On the front part here, I'm just going to check the propeller, make sure that the blades are in good shape. No big dings. We run on gravel edge strips a lot, and these props take a beating with the gravel, so I just want to make sure I've got propeller that's flyable today. Looks in good shape. Make sure my oil cooler is free of obstruction here. Make sure that my air intake doesn't have any dirt or gravel in here. That's the reason for the plug, but just checking. Another thing we check for here is a frangible stop on the nose wheel, and if the nose wheel is casted more than 56 degrees to either side, this frangible stop will break. So I know that if the frangible stop is gone, it's a no-go for the walk around. It has to be fixed. The nose gear has to be inspected by an AME. Just make sure that everything is in proper shape here. Now we do the walk around proper. Walk around, make sure there's no dings in the leading edge or in the struts. That's the air intake for the cabin air right there. The door warning over here. Take the pitot tube cover off. I don't know if you can see from the camera, but there's a static port on the bottom side of the pitot tube. Just make sure that we can see through that, they're not obstructed. Something else we want to check on the walk around is the overspeed indicator. It hasn't been damaged or bent. At 175 indicated airspeed, this little piece of metal gets pushed back. Keep coming along. Looking at the bolts and the nuts and making sure everything's in place. At the back of the leading edge on the tip, you can see a little venting hole there on the back of the wing, and that is a vent for the fuel tank. So we want to make sure that's not obstructed, that there's no hornet's nest in there or anything, or you could have fuel starvation in flight. Flap tracks are all good. There's little or no play in the flaps. Coming down here, we'll inspect the brakes, making sure that we have brake pads left. The hydraulic lines are in good shape here. Let's open this up. Just check the seal here. Make sure there's no major dents or damage, as it's a structural part of the airplane. Keep coming around. Same thing here, no dents on the leading edge of the tailplane. Now this little guy here is the rudder gust lock. And make sure this is taken off before flight, or the rudder won't move. Right there. Now there is a safety system to this. If it is engaged and you're going to fly, if you pull the elevator all the way back, so make the elevator go up, this gust lock will disengage. Let's make sure that is off. We have play, that's good. There are vortex generators on the tailplane. We make sure that they're all there. There's 18 on either side. On the Caravan, the VGs are not an STC, so you cannot fly if you have one or two missing. They all have to be there. Same thing over here, just looking for any pink elephants, making sure that the nuts and bolts are where they should be. No dents in the leading edge. Oxygen filler door. Over here we want to make sure that the air stair is working properly. Nothing's been damaged. And we keep going. Same thing on this side, we make sure that the brake pads are in a good condition. And that the hydraulic lines are connected. No leaks. We've got good tread on the tires. Check the flaps. Check the rails. And same thing on this side, we make sure that the vent for the fuel tank is clear of obstruction. Now this airplane here has a storm scope. What we want to do is we want to make sure that the holes that you can see over here, these act as drains, are not obstructed. If they are, water can collect inside and your storm scope doesn't work. Same thing on this pitot tube, we just make sure that the static holes are clear of obstruction. Pitot tube is clear. Keep coming along. Over on this side we want to make sure that the exhaust is firmly attached. It's not going to come loose on us. So I want to make sure that the cowling is closed all the way. And the last thing we're going to do is strain the fuel, make sure there's no dirt in there, and strain any excess oil that's been drained from the engine on the last shutdown. Alright, there are 3 fuel drains on each wing on the Caravan. That is one of them right here. And there's another one here and another one there. What we're going to do is just drain the lowest point right here. It's the lowest point on the wing. And we check the fuel, make sure there's no contaminant. Fuel looks clean to me. Same thing on the right wing. No contaminant. And then what we do is we come under here and there's a fuel reservoir that's about I think it's about 4 gallons. We have to make sure that there's no contaminant in here. Drain a bit there. No contaminant. Next thing we do is we drain the fuel filter. Pardon me, we don't drain it, we just take a sample. And same thing, make sure there's no contaminant. And then the last drain is the EPA can. It's the Environmental Protection Agency can. And what happens is on every shutdown of the engine throws away a little bit of unburnt fuel into this can. And after about 6 shutdowns, she's full. So what we do is we have to drain it so that the fuel doesn't drain onto the ground and contaminate anything. We just make sure all this is taken away, cleaned, filtered. And there we go, the EPA can is empty. We can close that up. And we'll dispose of this fuel in a can. Here we're just going to make sure that we've drained all the oil, excess oil that's been rejected by the engine on shutdown. So wait a couple seconds here. If there's no oil, we'll close the drain. And same thing right here. Should be no more than about 2 cc's of oil on every drain. Oh, there's just a drop there. There we go. Close that up. And that's it for the walk around.